Okay, great. Now everyone is back and online, and we can start our conversation. I'd like to introduce myself first, and then move to the speakers. So I'm your host, Andrey. I'm founder of and chief intelligence officer of XR inside Europe, focusing on startups developing or using VR and AR technology. First, I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel, and I just list the names and companies of our panelists and let them speak for themselves. And here is who is joining me in our roundtable. Angela Del Priore of HP Tech Ventures in San Francisco. Dave Haynes of HTC's Vive X in London. Petri Rajahalme from Nordic XR Startups in Helsinki. And our dear Richard Ward of McKinsey in Boston. And finally, last but not least, Ryan Wong of Outpost Capital in San Francisco. So with that, I turn to our panelists and let us know what do you do and where is your focus in ER and XR technologies. So let's start from Angela, please.
Hey everyone, thanks for having us. Nice to meet you all. Angela,
you're muted, Angela.
I can hear Angela
on the screen below.
So I have 1 out of 2
no,
can
hear
hear me.
Muted.
I can hear him.
Yeah, we can hear them, Andrew.
Angela, that's the most interesting thing I've heard all day. Too bad Andrey couldn't have heard it.
I think we're good now. All right. Hi, partner at HP Tech Ventures, the corporate venture arm of HP Inc. I look for startup companies to invest in and partner with on the AR and VR side, but also in gaming, AI, and data science tools. So, you know, there's HP business unit that does VR, right? The backpacks, et cetera. Well, they're kind of one of my clients, so to speak, in terms of who and I are working together to find companies that are kind of, you know, what they can use today and what they can use in the future. And we look for companies all over the world. Doesn't have to be just me in the US. No, I can't hear Andrey. Better than a flight delay. Come on.
Let's go around. Petri, maybe introduce yourself and we'll go around.
Yeah, I can go next. So hi, I'm Petri, heading from Helsinki, Finland, managing director at Nordic XR Startups. We're a joint venture between Gumi, a Japanese gaming company, listed gaming company, and Nordisk Film, part of Egmont Group in Denmark. We've been operational since 2017, currently have an active portfolio of 14 companies. So we invest in very early stage companies who are developing pretty kind of sector agnostic VR and AR. And yeah, so 30 to 100K tickets. And then we really do an active handholding for 6 months to kind of help them on towards their next fundraising.
So you're working also is an acceleration program?
Yeah.
Okay, great. From here, I suggest to move to Dave Haynes.
Yep, hi there. So my name's Dave Haynes. As Andrey mentioned, I'm based here in the UK. I work at HTC. I run our ViveX program here in Europe. ViveX exists to really accelerate the whole ecosystem by investing in XR startups, providing not just capital, but also support and network and advice.
Great. So Ryan, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Andrey. Great to be here. My name is Ryan Wang. I'm the founding partner of Outpost Capital. So we are a Silicon Valley-based VC firm focused on frontier technology investments. So in the VR AR space, we've been investing in a lot of companies since 2015. And currently we have around 16 portfolio companies that's VR/AR companies, and that pretty much covers software, hardware, enabling technologies, B2B, developer tools, content. So pretty much cover the whole spectrum. And yeah, great to be here, and great to share some of my ideas and hear some of my peer panelist stories as well.
Thank you. Great seeing you here. Thanks for joining. And finally, Richard Ward, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Ward. I'm the global lead for AR, VR, XR, filters, every other thing that we're going to think of at McKinsey & Company. I think the perspective that I have that's a little bit different is kind of more from the client's back. So we are definitely in the position for all of these global enterprises that are asking us, how does it work? Where's the value? What works? What doesn't? What are the use cases and those things? So kind of like seeing our conversations meeting in the middle, those that are working on the new frontiers of things that have either not been invented yet or just now out of the labs and are turning into things. And then my part kind of looking at it more from a little bit more the more conservative end user enterprises and what they're looking for and how it fits in with things.
Yeah, right. So basically working with them and often serving as proxies for them as expert consultant, you're acquiring all the wisdom and best practices they experience in their work.
So I would modify the words wisdom and best.
Okay, thank you. Well, basically, when it comes to looking into crystal balls, futurists and scientists create a vision, then startups and VCs together make it reality, and large established corporations often wear two hats as like customers and investors. They also are often the market makers, like I don't know if I don't know in which pool put like companies like Google or Apple. I think it's large corporates and market makers. So basically, they're shaping innovation systems in a particular sector. And let me step back and ask Richard to lay some groundwork for the conversation. So how do you see XR industry pillars, Richard? I heard you.
You mean like how people are using it, or what?
Yes, like that concept of AR, VR, and filters. Could you elaborate? I've heard about that before.
Sure. I mean, so I think everybody who's on here has a fairly good working definition of the differences between AR and VR in terms of how many photons are generated by a computer and how many of them are coming through the real world in the your eye. I think also the reality that we all accept at this moment, AR glasses don't really exist. It's really an AR helmet. So the magic glasses that Hollywood has promised us with Terminator vision for 30 years is not quite here yet. But VR, on the other hand, obviously, many of us, and probably not Dave, have got one of those floating around. It's in many ways here now, and from a capability standpoint. Towards that, what you find is the enterprise customers very clearly have two pools of usage. There's the white collar work, which for them, it's a very VR-centric world for enhancement of the work they're doing, collaboration, code design, those types of things, and possibly even transformation of job type. So for example, air traffic control, I'm pretty sure, is going to become a 8 hours in the VR headset job here within the next decade, rather than sitting in a glass tower at the edge of the airport. Now, on the other side, on the blue-collar side of things, what we see is that there's probably three areas. So training and assessment are very VR-centric, while assistance is very AR-centric. And you're starting to see these things become like a nice flywheel in which, training best practices, are people any good at it? How much assistance do they need in the field? New practice is found, turns into training, and it spins the wheel. And we're starting to see that the larger enterprises are getting much more into this, but they're still kind of stops and starts on different things.
Well, thank you so much. It's actually a very good metaphor. Can I summarize it as white collars as like a remote experts, and then the blue collars as a field operators, and call them and use it as a synonymous?
You would, except for I would say that actually it's white collar workers is kind of keyboard mouse warriors. And the question is now, what other things can they do, especially like in a remote work from home environment, and how are they leveraging these things to do that? With a heavy emphasis on anybody who does what could be considered to be drawing.
Okay.
So designers, engineers, people of that.
Right, the basic use cases for XR. So from here, let's talk first about augmented reality. And I know that Petri and Ryan has invested in multiple companies and multiple startups in that field. So why don't you, Ryan, explain us how do you see augmented reality? Because from my perspective, AR augments the real-life context of particular interaction with access to additional relevant digital content with that interaction. And the hardware, it's basically, well, let's not talk about hardware. I learned the concept of AR cloud from you, probably 3 years ago, and I was excited. Could you take it from here and talk about your vision for augmented reality?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a general overview, right? So I think the best way to look into the AR space is to look into the B2B versus the B2C use cases, and also from the device perspective, look into mobile AR versus glasses-based AR, right? So first of all, on the B2B versus B2C side, so far we've been looking into a lot of companies and startups that's building some kind of B2B services in the AR space. And the B2B service, especially in the industry field, like you just mentioned, the blue collar workers, this has actually already been widely adopted on the fields, in the factories, in their current workflow, right? So that's already a huge market. And in terms of healthcare, education, this has already been widely used and adopted as well. On the B2C side, however, we have been looking at most of the use cases and tractions from the mobile AR side. I'm always joking that right now TikTok is the world's largest AR company, because if you look into what the content creators on TikTok are doing, they're actually using a lot of AR features, different type of special effects or different type of camera filters to create amazing content, and this content are consumed by billions of people every day, right? So mobile AR is very accessible, and it's very low entry barrier, and it's more like a feature turn on for existing apps rather than introducing new apps to the consumers. So and on the other side, on the mobile AR side, we see apps like Pokemon Go that's introducing some kind of entirely new use cases and build a new marketplace around it. So I think this is the current status of the industry, and I think there has been a lot of buzz around Apple AR glasses, and also for companies like HoloLens or Unreal, they've been making a lot of progress on the consumer grade all feature building type of AR glasses. But I would expect something that's, and I think that's an opportunity that's still not yet to be filled by the market, which is if you think about AR glasses, right, there is the functionality part and there's the economic part, right? So the design concept behind HoloLens or Unreal is that you integrate a lot of sensors, and you have a lot of utilities around the glass, but the glass is relatively heavy, and it can create some kind of social awkwardness when you are wearing them on day-to-day basis as a consumer product, right? So I think in terms of AR glasses, one missing piece of the puzzle is that how can we trade off the utility part and come up with something that maybe single purpose, maybe can only serve a few dedicated functions, but it's comfortable enough to wear, and it doesn't create any social awkwardness. And I think that's something that in the near future, in the next 1 year or 2 years, some companies might be working on that perspective, and there will be some kind of opportunities from there as well. I'm not sure, Patrick, if you have anything to add.
Well, I think Petri, I would love to hear from Petri about his companies in augmented reality field, which develop actually tools for handheld VR and in general for AR cloud. Could you tell us about Immersal, for instance?
Yeah, so Immersal is a very good example of kind of also, well, in many aspects, the struggles of finding the right product market fit, working on AR cloud and how to monetize it. I think Matt Miesnix has in a podcast very well talked about targeting developers as paying customers and how that wasn't the right way to go. And in another way, they are also a very good example of the convergence of technologies around AR. So talking about computer vision, machine learning, and especially 5G. So we all know that operators are looking desperately for the use cases of 5G in order to sell and deploy their to their clients. And Immersal has in their latest pivot found a really good. I mean, the demand on the industry side is huge at the moment, where they're combining AR, the AR cloud technologies or the SDK that they've been developing with 5G. So we know that 5G is going to be a big enabler for AR, enabling lower latency, and for them it's going to be also a lot about delivering larger packages. So it's kind of in a bullseye with the good advancements that it's going to bring to the industry. And obviously they're very industry focused. Maybe more in general about our views. So we last year, for example, we saw a lot of companies pitching some kind of social AR, social mobile AR games. Like everybody were talking about how do you need to get the kids up from the couches and how you have social elements, but it's still in that part of the world, it's still not the right medium. Like Pokemon was able to do it, but you don't want to play your game through your mobile phone. So it's not yet the right answer to go in my view when it goes to the gaming side. But just briefly to comment on social on kind of consumer facing sides, I'm really bullish on mobile AR when it comes to e-com or retail and how brands are going to be using it and e-com shops are going to be using it to better their retention numbers and call to actions or whatever it is.
Yeah, I totally agree. And well, we can get to that later, but basically enabler of AR is the camera which is on. And if we recall 2020, that was actually the year of camera on, and everyone toggles it on. So I stumbled yesterday or a couple days ago on the AR filters on Zoom. So like the more camera is on, the more augmented reality cases I think we will see. Dave, Angela, would you like to add something on augmented reality side? Because I know that we can spend hours because we are all passionate about VR. That's why I decided to start from augmented reality. Angela, probably you have some investment in that field.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really close. I mean, the contact lens, motion that I invested in is a little bit out, obviously, because it's just so much more complicated. But I thought what North had developed before they got acquired by Google, especially the V2.
Yeah.
I mean, I wore the V1 for I made myself wear it for 80 hours, right? And it was a little bit heavy, et cetera. But it's just it is getting really close. So, I mean, I think this time next year, half of us will have an AR pair of glasses, right? Assuming we're out and about, that are going to give us mapping function and text messages. I think there are plenty of use cases, and whether you have a camera outside always on or not, I think we're really at the precipice now. Finally, for a lightweight, right? Not a light field, HoloLens type thing, but just but it's making my life better and more, more enjoyable.
Okay, Dave.
Yeah, I just want to add, I mean, two things to go back to Pokemon and Snapchat and things like that. I think what a lot of people miss, I mean, I find it crazy. Pokemon Go did $1 billion in revenue last year. That's just for that game. It's not even a new game. And, their lifetime revenue of that game is amazing as well. Now, I wouldn't consider Pokemon Go really to be AR. In fact, feature off when I'm trying to catch my little Pokemon. But that revenue has allowed them to basically acquire companies like 60.ai, and now when you're playing Pokemon Go, when I'm out in the park, they're basically asking me as a user to go and map the world, and that's really powerful. If Niantic can go and map the world, I mean, forget Pokemon. I mean, just think of all of the other compute that can then be kind of merged onto that reality and that reconstruction of the world that Pokemon has created. So I think that's a really big thing that a lot of people miss. And then Snapchat, we all think, probably a lot of us don't spend a lot of time on Snapchat, but some of the things they're doing with Lens Studio, with their camera partnerships, I mean, they really are building an ecosystem where AR is now normalized into everybody's life. And, I have Snap Camera as well, so I can use my Snapchat filters on Zoom and in places like this. So again, I think those two things are kind of, seem trivial now, but are really kind of paving the way. In terms of Vive and kind of what we've been working on, ViveX obviously invests in future topics. So AR is very much a topic of investment companies that we look at for ViveX. But I think where companies like ourselves who are VR first can really come into this is, we have these great VR headsets now. They all have cameras on the front of them, so allowing better and easier pass through. And then when you have the pass through, having the SDKs to do things like, room reconstructions and, object recognition and things like that. And I'd encourage everyone. There's a really interesting podcast that Kent Bai did with a company called Aardvark, where they're overlaying objects and things into virtual worlds, almost as if you have like an AR overlay into VR. So although the head-worn AR isn't quite there, or we're still getting better trying to keep certain rules of physics, I think all of these things are helping us to prepare for an AR world anyway. But I think pass-through for us is in the next year and a half is a very addressable medium, and I think enterprise is where that's going to be adopted first.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So pass-through VR, pass-through AR, I think it's going to be paving road for real augmented reality glasses and developing use cases on the enterprise side. Just one thing that I wanted to add here: do we add smart glasses like Lenovo, for instance, as and heads-up displays as augmented reality? Because if we do, then I think I was just astonished by the deal and the proposition made by TeamViewer. So basically, they launch frontline suite for all range of devices, augmented reality or smart glasses, by acquiring in July of 2020 Ubimax for 150 million. So I think that was an amazing milestone for that industry, and the way how they frame the narrative around the technology is absolutely amazing and fits into Richard's vision about blue-collar workers. So basically, it's a pick or assist or assemble or I think fix or something like that. They have like 4 pillars. But let's move on to virtual reality. And in that sense, Angela and Dave has big footprint in that industry. HP entered with Revert 2, and HTC was a big player since very early days of VR. So let's start from Angela. How do you see HP Revert road to market?
Thankfully, it's. Yeah. I mean, I think it's doing really well. It's definitely remains a strong focus area for HP in terms of growth, whether it's the backpad or the headset or whatever else is going to come out down the line. But we keep putting money into it because it's returning, and it's the market and the team that's kind of making it happen. I think others are also doing well in the space. So I think it's finally technologically where it needs to be, right?
Yep.
People to kind of have these experiences. The one area, or not one area, we're not doing this in VR, right? It's still a little bit cumbersome. It's still a little bit hard. There's still glitches and Steam updates and, right? So, but it's gaining traction. So the proven efficacy across all these different lines, right? Whether it's for education or training, it's just a wonderful technology. I think we're all believers in it. And I think more importantly, it's sustainable because businesses and consumers are kind of getting that ROI, that really like enhanced experience versus just using a flat screen. So
yeah. But let's look into enterprise relationship because we also into B2B business. Like HP was a long standing partner for many 500 Fortune corporates since long time. So now I think with this revolution of enterprise, how do you see, where would you attribute the revenue that you gain from VR backpacks, whether it goes into hardware, like computing hardware, or it goes into VR account, like in your books?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Yeah.
How would I?
Well, basically, I'm asking, the HP has a very great complementary product, which is VR backpack. When you put a backpack and then you can have a standalone setup with the backpack and the head and the HP reverb. Does it help?
Has anybody played Half-Life like that? It's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
So it really makes it free roaming, and it's part of the game.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Dave. So Dave, HTC has made a great move in 2020, recognizing early the event industry and VR impact of VR. Let's start from your hardware. Like for me, HTC was revolutionizing this path through VR AR first, and you have been experimenting a lot in that part of XR. How do you see the technology company in 2021? Like, where is your main focus?
Yeah, well, I'd say, and just kind of, I see a question from Sebastian there talking about 2020 and, the effects of COVID there. I think what's been interesting for us is, on the gaming side, Angelo mentions things like Half-Life Alyx and, stuff like that was really great in 2020 to highlight why, PC VR is still really great. The appetite for consumers to get VR in their homes has only gone up in 2020. So I think 2021 will see those trends continue. I think for enterprise, COVID has almost had a kind of, mixed effect. On some ways, it's really been positive because it's catalyzed a lot of use cases like remote collaboration, and also has forced, people to think about why they really need VR. I guess the negatives were also just, with people not being in kind of factories, some companies that were addressing some use cases, they had a few months around COVID where, we weren't sure what was going to happen. So it has been mixed. But for Vive, one thing that we have really done is to embrace, this remote collaboration trend. So, and it was really born out of our own needs as well. So, we're an investor in a company called Engage, and we actually hosted our, in March, we had our big Vive developer event in China canceled because of COVID. So nobody could travel. So what can we do? So, the China team really picked that up and, said, right, we're going to do this full event in VR. And actually I spent, first few months of lockdown doing a lot of different, developer events and meetups, and even an investor event that we collaborated.
We did together.
And Richard. Yeah. So I think that's been really positive. Now the big question is, how will that continue? But we put out something we call the XR Suite. So that's trying to find some of our own products, but also best-in-class products in that kind of social collaboration space. So we have Vive Sync, which is a great tool for very simple meetings. Then Vive Sessions, which is powered by Engage, which is great if you want to hold a virtual event or a slightly larger, get a larger group of people together. That's what we did the investor event in. We also partnered with Vibella to bring out Vive Campus, which actually isn't in VR. It's cross-platform, so you can also hold a big conference or get a large company together. And then finally, and these cross over into consumer as well, but also VR chat. And the Museum of Other Realities are into that. So we've been really trying to drive that behavior of kind of, getting people to think about doing more of their work in VR. And I think the crucial thing is a lot of those platforms are available in VR as the best possible experience, but they also have a desktop or a mobile client. So I think, in a world where, not everybody has VR, for those platforms to, allow people to come in at different entry points and then realize maybe later how great VR is a great passageway into VR. So we hope that trend continues in 2021.
Well, that's actually great that you brought up this mention of 3D spaces on 2D screen. We had a long-going debate with Richard Ward regarding that, like whether we need to continue and support this development of and that connection between two worlds like 2D and 3D. And we actually had a question from the audience, which I assembled yesterday on LinkedIn. The question came from Inga Petraevskaya, who is founder of CEO and CEO of Tvori. So what do you think of several VR apps going non-VR or adding non-VR version like Wave, Gravity Sketch, or VR apps or 3D apps adding like Verbella? Do you feel this is the right way, the right strategy overall? Can you think about it, Richard? I know you have a strong opinion about that. Can you share?
My opinion, very simple, is that it's cowardice. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
And the analogy is, and we already know how this works because of the transition from radio to television. The transition to television was delayed by many years because everyone was afraid that the television set was too expensive and not enough people were going to buy them. So of course the entertainment providers want the biggest audience they could get. So they would actually broadcast the audio channel of their television shows over radio, which if you've ever listened to the audio part of a television show, like a sitcom, it's horrible, right? None of the visual jokes work and the interactions of the people that set up. But they did that because they were afraid of having too small of an audience. And it actually delayed television because all the people at home who were listening to this on the radio said, you know what, this isn't very funny. I guess I don't need to buy a television,
right?
And so I do think that there's an element of people trying to show VR, which is truly a stereoscopic, three-dimensional CGI type thing, 6DoF type world, on a YouTube screen or some other flat projection of it. Most of it looks pretty janky, and I think all it does is it reinforces biases for people that maybe this isn't that cool and I don't need to go buy one of these things yet.
Well,
that's my opinion.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think there's an element of that. If you put on a VR, if you say that you're going to put on a virtual event that is VR, if you don't have a VR headset, you can't go. Which, just like in the real world, if you want to go see the Cirque du Soleil show, you actually have to get in your car and go to the auditorium. I mean, there is a minimum threshold.
Yeah. What do you think, Ryan or Patrick?
I totally get what you're saying, Richard, and I hope that that's where we're gonna be and where we're headed. It's just a reality for a lot of companies that there is a transition phase where they need to pay the salaries in the company.
Maybe it's too early for them. They shouldn't have been funded.
Need to find a way to. Yeah, I mean, timing obviously is the age-old question in investing, but I mean, I think there's some good examples where being cross-platform is working. Like Rec Room, it was purely VR, and it was built for VR, but it's still, there's a lot of the social aspects that work on other platforms as well, and it's been working crazy well on the Xbox, for example. They've been topping the lists of free apps. So I think there's an element of transition where I hope it's going to be to the benefit of the whole ecosystem, and it's just a transitional phase into when it's going to be even more frictionless to be in VR, and more people will have the capacity to own a headset. And there's no denying that the experience is completely different in VR versus a 2D experience. But I think there's companies who have been doing well in kind of minimizing the friction between going from 3D to 2D. But yeah, I totally, on a long-term vision, I'm with you.
Okay,
Ryan? One more thing I like to address in terms of this cross-platform topic is actually WebXR. So I think WebXR by default is cross-platform, whether you have a VR headset or you have a mobile phone, tablet, whatever you have, whatever device you have, you can access the content with just an URL, right? No need to download anything. And the other thing about WebXR is that as Patrick just mentioned, a lot of VR experiences, even today, you have a lot of friction, right? Sometimes you forget to charge your to charge your headset. Sometimes your controller is running out of battery. Sometimes you need to run out kind of updates in order to get into the experience. Sometimes the loading time is just too long, and it doesn't make sense to kind of wait in the lobby for 5 minutes before you can start anything, right? And friction is one of the killing issue in the whole VR space. And WebXR by default is cross-platform, and it kills the friction. It's click on URL, you can open up a world, right? And you can engage with other people from different platforms, having different devices seamlessly. So I think WebXR is one of the undervalued sector in the whole VR space, and in terms of killing friction and in terms of cross-platform, that's something that WebXR by default has a great advantage on as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because well, I personally think that those transitions won't be revolutionary. So we need to move one stage gradually from one stage to another. The COVID definitely accelerated a lot of those things. But before we move to that topic, I just want to capture a quick opinion of each of you in response for the questions from Ferhan Özkan, co-founder of XR Bootcamp. So what are the top 3 XR-specific skills that your portfolio companies or partner startups having hard time funding qualified talents? And I would suggest to start probably with Dave. Like, are you aware of your company or portfolio company's struggles with personnel and stuff? You are muted, Dave.
Excellent. I wonder how many times I'll do that in 2021. So yeah, I think it's a great question. Thank you for that. One thing that's really interesting, we have a lot of enterprise companies in the portfolio, and the enterprise sales slog is hard, even when you're selling kind of B2B SaaS platform, something where you don't need extra hardware. When you're trying to sell a B2B VR solution into an enterprise, the sales cycles can sometimes be even, longer and harder. So I think, and it's a real challenge, because quite often, if you're a B2B VR company, you're still maybe only seed funded, you need some great sales experience on the team, but you might not be able to afford it, or, things like that. So I think every founder kind of needs to, brush up on their own sales skill, and really, don't underestimate the kind of the B2B sales cycle. So if you can find the right person into the team to do that, then that's great. I think the good thing is, what I'm seeing in the portfolio is a lot of those companies really are now scaling up with that. So it's not just, selling in the concept, it's actually saying, right, let's fully deploy this in, very large companies. So it is positive, but yeah, let's try and fund our companies some more so they can get some great sales talent.
Great. I totally agree that the sales skills and salespeople are the most missed in VR industry, XR industry. Meanwhile, I just want to draw your attention to the polls which we put up on the right screen. So if you go and click your answer, you will and choose your answer, you also will see the response from the audience. And I encourage to do everyone and just fill all those questions except last two, which doesn't make sense, but I can't turn them from the post. So it's just go there and make your choices. And meanwhile, I want to go back to Petri. So you have a lot of small companies in your portfolio. What are their need for people?
Yeah, just gonna echo
Sales.
what Dave said. Like engineering-wise, there's no need for talent.
Okay.
There's no shortage of talent. They can find the engineering and the programming skills that they need. But we see it time and time again how they fall short on marketing, on branding, on telling their story, and executing on their sales roadmap. So sales and marketing, definitely the biggest two shortages in our portfolio, and what we see
Okay,
a
let's
lot
keep it short
in,
and ask the same question to Ryan and Angela and Richard. So I want just all of your opinion. Like, can you?
Yeah, absolutely. My quick answer to this question is, if we think about a VR AR startup, right? Most of the VR AR startup are not solving problems that's in the VR AR space, right? They are using VR AR to solve problems in the real world. So the skill sets that we require from people working on this kind of startups are not only VR AR skill sets, right? Are not only engineering skills, but also how do you apply this this solution to some kind of real world problems, right? And how do you solve this problem? For example, if it's a company doing using VR to do virtual concert, you also need to understand the music industry, right? Or if you are using if you are building like a healthcare type of VR AR startup, you need to be in the healthcare industry as well. So it always requires people who have different type of backgrounds and different combination of skill sets. And I think the synergy and the compatibility between each of the members in the team is essential, and that's one of the key challenges in the especially for early stage VR AR companies.
Right, Angela.
Yeah, I would echo that to a degree. I think there's so many people, including myself, who love the technology and what it can do, that you can easily get blinded and just be like, this is fantastic. And you've got the efficacy, but you know something? The ROI is not proven. And I would go back to what Richard was saying beforehand in terms of politely disagreeing. It's just like, it's an awesome solution, but since it's not ERP, people love the solution more than they love the business problem that they're trying to address, whatever the industry or whatever the use case is. And that's why I'm just like, for now, go cross-platform. Don't require everyone to buy a $3,000 headset. Don't require everyone to have a tethered PC. Go where they are today, show it on a tablet, and then let's move them gradually to this better solution. Because you know something, the price to the quality to the pain point, it's going to vary. And until people kind of see that value proposition, it's like you've got to get out of the innovation. It's great to get bought by the CTO or the innovation person at that big corporation,
right?
But it kind of means that's like nothing. You got to go to the product line person who is managing the P&L, and when they see the value of this and saying, "Oh, I'm going to give this to my XYZ workers because it's going to make them X% more efficient," then you're kind of hitting it and you have a scalable business. So I think there are sales skills, but it's just like it's where we're at with the market maturity in terms of the number of customers who are going to spend enough money and get out of that just kind of like, let's just play with a POC or a little bit of NRE and let's put this into production. You see the same thing on AI, right? Particularly on the edge applications. It's so hard. You have heterogeneous environments, latency, security, bandwidth issues. It's like VR has kind of a different set of challenges, but it's just like there are all these costs involved. And it gets stolen, it gets broken, the battery dies. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's just I think more where the market is versus a lack of scale set in the industry.
Yeah. So basically, and Richard, please.
Yeah. So kind of on the two things that you're talking about, Ryan. There's a key word that in the advanced analytics space as it rolled out for the last decade was this role of the translator. right? This mythical person that had all the deep domain expertise of the problem set, but also was a Python programmer, and they knew what's going on. It's the same thing, yeah. And the part, if you really want to see why market economics fail, you would ask yourself, those are pretty rare. Why aren't they the most highest paid person in the company, right? And the answer is they're not usually. But then so I think we're going to need these translators as well in the VR AR space, those people that understand the limitations of the technology and the capabilities, but also the core problems of the domain and the disciplines. But actually, Angela, the thing that you see and what we do with this is actually we show that whenever we do our own projects and convince people to do stuff, we actually pull out the headsets as the very last part of the discussion.
Yeah.
We start with literally an XY bar chart that shows a bunch of economic and performance benefits that come from the data that is gathered from the use of VR, right? That's the part that most people, I think, are not really getting into. These things are massive human performance measurement systems, right? Because the only way it works is all of the accelerometers and the cameras and and all of these things working together. If you think it's creepy what they know about you just from typing in your Google searches, right? What's known about you as a human being I always tell everybody, the next digital twin is you.
Yeah.
And so the thing that comes out that, and so when we get into this, especially around industrial operations and safety, we literally start off the entire conversation with things that, for example, like in safety, we have a thing where we run people using Oculus Go's. We do 20 to 40 of them every 30 minutes, and we run 1,000 people at a refinery in a conference room through there in a week. And then we come back with all the metadata about them, and we're able to say stuff like, hey, the guys on your maintenance night shift that are contractors, not employees, are 30% below benchmark on trip and fall hazards. And so that right there is is what people want to buy. That's what the top of the org chart wants to buy. They could care less how you got the data. Whether you followed people around with clipboards or you put RFID sensors on everybody or you ran them all through a simulation in VR, they could care less. What they want is the chart that shows that this group out of my 1,000 workers is below benchmark, because then they can make capital allocation decisions on that. Do we just train those people? Do we change the process? All that stuff. And so I think when people fall out of love with the cool factor and realize what you actually can do with a human performance measurement system, then we find it's actually pretty easy to talk to people about using this stuff.
Yeah.
Because the ones at the top of the org chart fully understand the economic value of it, and then just say, hey, look, there's no difference between this and buying an ERP system, right? It's a pain in the butt. There's going to be change factors. There's costs involved, but we understand which KPIs and metrics that we're going after and how to put the teams together to go after it. So by the way, my only advice for anybody who sells enterprise systems that are trying to do VR enterprise systems is literally do not do the demo until the end of the meeting. Because if you do it at the beginning, it turns into a brainstorming session about all the cool stuff you could do with VR, and nobody ever makes any decisions, right?
Yeah, right. And well, we're approaching the end of our session. I again want to draw your attention to the polls, and please do click on them and just answer on what do you see there. So how do we conclude and with what this? I think the most affected probably and negatively affected in VR sphere was location-based entertainment, and it's amazing and I just want to bring up the case of Spaces, which is I think LA-based company in location-based entertainment, who build a product which enables anyone to put on a headset and go into virtual reality on Zoom, and they were acquired by Apple like within the 6 months. I know I spoke to the team in very early days. Like I tested product, and on the 14th or on the 4th day since they started development, and they were rolling out features like on daily basis, and that's what made them appealing to external investors, and that's why. What is your outlook for location-based entertainment? Will we get people back to the venues? Petri, well, I know you have company in your portfolio. Can you briefly?
Yeah, so Pixely, who are operating 5 arcades in Finland, about a month ago they had their record Saturday sales, which is contrary to what everybody would think about for LBVR. Obviously, we haven't been affected as heavily by the lockdown measures, so that they have that going for them compared to other markets in Europe or the US. But what they've shown is if you do it in a way that is safe for everybody to use, they have clean box they use, so they UV light all of the headsets after each session, so they're essentially clean when you get to use them. They use social distancing, so it is possible to do. Now they don't do free roam now, so it's multiplayers, but you're essentially in your own booth. So they have that going for them as well when it comes to safety measures. But it's going to be interesting to see when it's more the free roam space, how you'll be able to cope with the measures that are at hand right now. Now hopefully everything's going to be back to normal at some point. So I think the entertainment factor is still there, but then it becomes a question of IP also, and the Void obviously being hit by the IP wars is also an angle to take into account.
Thanks for sharing. But a quick question to other participants: do you see people going out into some location instead of buying, for instance, Oculus Quest? Forgive me, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, Andrey, why do people go to restaurants when they can cook at home?
Yeah,
right?
But it's not about VR. It's about the experience.
No, that's just exactly. That's the whole thing. So is there going to always be somebody who why do I go to movie theaters when I got a huge television at home? There's other things besides the technology. And there's a part of it also that the people with the LBE systems almost always have bigger, better, more expensive technology because they get to amortize it across multiple users than your average individual user. So will LBE come back or continue or whatever? I think of course. The only question is how big does it get to be, right? And I mean, it's do you end up that, like, for example, in the city of New York, do you end up with having only one LBE center, or do you end up with 100, right? But there will be one, I mean, for sure. But it's a question of, like, how big does the market get based on what, how these things move around and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, COVID really affected the LBE business. Now, interestingly enough, actually, just as we were going into lockdown, I was concluding an investment in a company in the LBE space, and they did have one investor drop out, but other than that, there was it was a really strong round. The company's actually in a really good place, and I think what's exciting is that that company is now gearing up for when we all get out of lockdown, right? I mean, I don't think we're quite going to go to the swinging 20s as someone has predicted, but I think everyone is going to want to go and meet with friends, go and do something they couldn't have done on Zoom, like all of these things. So I think it really is a matter of timing. The unfortunate thing is some of the established players obviously were gearing up to scale up in 2020, and I think a lot of founders and companies have been very resilient, to get through. The company we invested in were called Emissive. They're doing expeditions that of kind of big working with big cultural institutions. So they weren't as affected as some which are going into kind of leisure parks and things like that. But yeah, I'm feeling positive that when we come out of this, there will be a big surge in demand, and the founders that have been able to get through kind of will hopefully reap the rewards of that in a challenging environment.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. Ryan.
Definitely going to come back, but I think it is a hard business to run efficiently just because of all the costs in terms of the real estate, the operators, making sure the operators are giving your guests a great experience. So I think there's this huge splay of who's going to actually succeed at it and kind of go, and then a lot of other places are going to be challenged economically.
Ryan?
Right. So I think I agree with all the comments so far, and the only thing I want to add is that I want to draw a line between LBE and LBVR, right? So in the in some of my cases, I see like there has been some innovations in the LBE space, trying to learn from some of the lessons in the LBVR space. In that, how can we make our existing physical venues and infrastructures more interesting, right? So we're not talking about just like a LBVR location where you have a bunch of VR headset and you can go there playing games and do stuff. I'm also talking about like the existing venues such as bars, nightclubs, movie theaters, stadiums. How can we make those infrastructure much more interesting by providing some digitization type of experience, by adopting some kind of VR, AR features or experiences in those type of places, right? And I think that's where I see most of the tractions in the whole LB space post COVID, on how people return to these venues and people start to social physically again, right? What kind of social behaviors can they do differently at that point, and what kind of services or entertainment or some other experience can we provide using the existing infrastructure that we already have? So I think that's something that's most interesting to me in the LBE space.
Yeah,
which I think that's going to be filters, right? Handheld social media enabled filters. I saw an app or a filter the other day for bowling, right?
bowling.
Oldest LBE game in the world, right? everybody goes to a specific place, expensive infrastructure. The game hasn't changed in 150 years or whatever, but it's an AR app that you film your buddy play, making their shot. It tracks the ball when it hits the things. If it detects if it's a strike or not, and then makes like AR filter fireworks and all sorts of crazy stuff. You push one button and it posts straight to Instagram, right?
Yeah.
And so I, thus I completely see what if you're talking about something like that, Ryan, I completely see that kind of filter world merging with the LBE world, where people have got location-based things specifically for that. I think that's going to be almost like entry stakes, if you will, for almost every one of these locations and businesses.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming over and for your contribution. I don't think I have a time to conclude here, but I will be on the main stage with 5 minutes conclusion in 20 minutes. I'll took some notes and matched my options with your answers. So I think I can summarize that is that XR is definitely a future. Stand strong and still if you are in that industry, even if you're in location-based entertainment. But basically, be focused on real-life cases, grow your sales team, and focus on the needs that you can solve or enhance with the solution. And just don't sell technology, sell products. That's my 50 cents to the audience. Well, thank you so much. I have so much things to talk with you. Probably will organize another session other day. I know Dave and Petri run the podcast. I think they may be willing to accommodate some of us one day. And looking forward to our new encounters on online, in virtual spaces, and of course into the video streams. Thank you, and thanks for coming over.
Thanks. See you all later.
See you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. Take care.
Bye.